fire, fury.
Welcome to Fuel Your Drive. I am your host, Josh York. And guys, we got a great guest today. I'm really excited about this guest. I've been paying attention to this man for quite a while. He's a mover. He's a shaker. He gets the job done. He doesn't make excuses. He takes action. What do I talk about? I talk about this all the time. The action takers are the money makers. And this man is an action taker. And I love that. And honestly, how this all started, true story, no joke. I was impressed with his hair. I was like, this guy's got a great hairstyle, man. Good gel, slicks it up to the side. I was loving it. And I kind of reached out to him and we started talking and now we become friendly and we're starting to work together. But with that said, I want to introduce you to Jack Johnson. Jack, welcome to the show.
I love the energy, man. I love it. I'm pumped. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Jack. So Jack, first, let's kind of get into a little bit about your background, so my listeners, know a little bit about you and what's gotten you to where you are today. Because you're doing big things, and I am impressed, and I know others are impressed. So let's start there.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to believe. I started my franchise journey in 2002. Started with a healthcare franchise. When I tell you we started this healthcare franchise with 300 grand, that's it. That's all we had. And it was, wing and a prayer. I'm sure you experienced this when you started your business, and it was hustle and go to work or go home and get a job. Thankfully, we grew that franchise to hundreds of locations and a private equity sale. And that's what brought me into the franchise consulting world. I should mention that probably the more talented half of my team, my wife, Jill, is not on the podcast today. But it's just the franchise world, as you know, is awesome. And you talked about winning and having the drive to win. That's what we try and help our clients do is find the business where they can accomplish things they never dreamed possible, because that's what you can do with business ownership and franchise ownership.
100%. So let's go back a little bit though to the business you started. So did you ever have a plan B? Like, did you ever say, wow, this is not going to work? Or, wow, if this doesn't work, I can do this. Or, what was your mindset going into it?
I have to be honest with you. I always have a kind of a plan B in the background, right? Like, what happens if we don't, hit our revenue goals? What's sort of the sort of DEFCON 5, pro forma that we follow? So I always have it, but I have to tell you something. I kind of refuse to let it happen. It's like if we get to a point where we're not doing what we should be, I get kind of pissed and I get after it and I will, work until I make it happen. It's just sort of a refusal to accept mediocrity or not making it happen.
100%. So, look, I always say plan B is for losers. And, what you're saying more is like, I wouldn't really say it's a plan B. It's more of like how you're going to maneuver to make it work, and how you're going to figure out a way. Because, I tell people this all the time. There's always a way. And no matter how bad it gets or how painful it is, there's always a way. But that's up to you as the person to drive that. That's up to you as the person to take the action. It's up to you to make it happen. And if you're hearing, any type of noise and negativity from other people, you gotta just get rid of it and just pay no attention to it. Like, have you ever had, times in your life, coming up, obviously, where you are today, where people were negative, and how did you handle that?
Well, I'll tell you something. We coach on any given day, we're coaching 30 entrepreneurs or would-be soon entrepreneurs. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give is when you become a franchise owner and you get into a system, it's like the classroom. There's A students, B students, C students. Yep. Don't hang out with the C students. Don't listen to the C students. Don't listen to the negativity. Find the A students and make them your best friends. Only follow what the most high performing people in your particular system are doing, because if you get caught there in that sort of undercurrent of people who are underperforming, they spend more time talking about what's not happening versus what is. And I'll give you a quick example. So back in about, 2012, when I was at Home Care Assistance, we trained 2 new franchisees, both in the state of Ohio, one in Cleveland, one in Cincinnati. A couple of years later, Cincinnati's got a $4 million business. Cleveland's barely doing $1 million. Cincinnati's going out, finding ways. He's taking all our programs. I'm sure you see this with your franchise. He's doing everything, right? He's networking. He's an animal. The guy in Cleveland is sitting there saying, well, you guys aren't supporting me this way or you're not doing that. These guys got the same training. They're in similar markets. but it was different attitudes. And so for me, it's always surrounding yourself with people that have sort of that winning attitude.
100%. It's like, when people want to talk to, our franchise owners, in the process of coming on board, and sometimes they want to talk to a mix, but I always ask them, like, are you going to be a top performer? And they say, yes. I said, are you sure about that? And they say, yes. I said, okay. So you want to talk to top performers or low performers? Because just like what you said is really true. You have people doing, A pluses and people doing C's and D's. And that happens in McDonald's. That happens in every franchise. But the ones who are putting in more of the work are the ones who are going to be more successful. So, what is your secret to, I'm always seeing activity, right? I'm liking your stuff when it pops up. I'm always seeing activity. What are you doing? Well, I know what you're doing, but I want my listeners to know, what do you do to create that activity? Because, one of my biggest pet peeves, I can't stand this, is when someone says, oh, I tried it, but it didn't work. Okay, how many times did you try it? Twice? Or they'll say, oh, I tried it for three weeks. So, like, walk us through how Double J, Jack Johnson, does it, because I know you get the job done. So I want people to hear about it.
Well, I think it's understanding yourself, right? It's understanding where you drive, where you get your energy from. And the further I go along in being an entrepreneur, it's being very conscious of my energy and taking care of myself. So I really started to incorporate a lot of things from more meditative breathing to the Wim Hof breathing to things like cold plunges and cryotherapy, as well as working out every single day, because I want to have that energy and that confidence to drive me. And listen, I'm 48, so it's not like when I was 30. So I think first is take care of your body, take care of your mind, make sure that you're right. But secondly, find those things that drive you. I've always respected how a guy like Tom Brady, who's won all these Super Bowls, all these accolades, still finds a way to get mad. He finds things to get mad. And I would tell you, I'm not at all comparing myself to Tom Brady, but I do the same thing. I find things to make me mad, to make me want to go to work and go hustle and do it better than the next guy.
Love it. I love it. That's so true, because it's, look, you're hitting on all the things I talk about, and I always say, the number one most important thing is how you think about yourself, right? Like when you're like literally standing in front of a mirror naked, are you confident? What do you feel? What do you feel? Like, that's very important, because that's going to change everything. I always say confidence changes everything. In order to do that, you got to move. And look, you look fantastic, man. Why do you look fantastic? Because you move your body, you take care of yourself, you're willing to do uncomfortable things. So now, just so people understand, because we didn't really touch on it. So you're in the franchise industry, as I am, and you help people go into franchises. So maybe you could just explain a little bit how that works, so people understand that, because they might be interested in the gym guys, they might be interested in another franchise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. So I am a franchise consultant. The easiest way to think about what I do is very similar to a real estate agent, except instead of helping you find the right house in the right neighborhood, the right school district for your kids, I help you find the right franchise to do what you want to do. Everybody has a different why. Not everyone's like me. Listen, I like making money. I like being rich. I like going to the Bahamas at the last second and living a life I could only dream of as a kid. But other people have other things. They want to help people. They want to diversify. They're already happy. So whatever they want to do, my job is to show them how to accomplish that with a franchise. And there's a franchise for everyone if they're willing to follow my process. And we, on any given day, we're working, as I said before, with 30 different people on their franchise search. We're working with 500 plus franchises. There is something out there for everyone. And would you believe we saved people last year over $500,000 in franchise fees? So we're able, because of our volume, to get them a better deal on their franchise and provide them free guidance. I don't charge for my guidance in helping people find the right franchise.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. And, I really like how you kind of compared that to like real estate, because it's very true, and it's definitely a process going through. And you got to make sure, obviously, that you're being guided properly, because sometimes, what you're going to see online might not be 100% correct. And when someone has a deeper understanding of the industry and brands to work with and who's good and who's real, who's not, because I will tell you, like, I hear this all the time. Like, look, I'm very on top of everything, but I think it's crazy when someone doesn't like respond to a territory check. Let's say, someone reaches out, is this area open? I might have a possible, interest for you. And someone doesn't respond for a week. Like, I don't understand that. That makes zero sense to me. Like, anyone who acts with not having urgency and not thinking it's important is not going to move the needle. So maybe talk a little bit about, some challenges you see with some people looking into obviously franchises. What are some challenges people have? Because, one thing I always hear is fear, right? 90% of the calls I'm on, people are always nervous. And I always say that's a good thing, because if you're not nervous, there's something wrong with you. But I always say fear is the greatest indicator that you have to do it. So how do you, what are some things you hear, or maybe it is fear, or maybe it's other things, and how do you handle it?
I like fear. My son and I were just having this conversation last week. We were in the Bahamas, and there was this water slide that must have been, I don't know, 200 feet, whatever it was straight down drop. And, he's a little guy, he's 8 years old, and he's afraid of all this stuff. And I said, listen, it's okay to be afraid. Being afraid, you're going to be afraid so many times in your life. It's what you do with that fear, and how can you control it? And what I like to say to our clients when we work with them is, it's okay to be afraid, but we got to be excited too. If we don't have excitement to go along with the fear, it's not worth it. Interestingly enough, once you go along, like you said, fear is such a great motivator. When people get too comfortable, all of a sudden they lose their edge.
Yep.
I think one of the first years of being a franchise consultant, when we finally had the business going to a place where we were comfortable, right? We could buy a house, we could do all the stuff we wanted to do. I wasn't afraid for a minute. And I felt it almost was like a feeling of being naked. I hated it. I was like, this doesn't feel right. I need to get afraid again. And so you can use fear, but it's learning how to use it and seeking out other people that understand how to use it to your advantage.
So would you agree that comfort kills?
I do agree with that. I think that's a great point. And by the way, I do want to give you a compliment, like you mentioned with the territory checks, for people wondering what that is. When a guy like me calls up, gym guys and says, hey, do you have territory available in San Diego? If sometimes with other franchises, we may not hear for a couple hours, couple days. With gym guys, you hear in a couple of seconds, and that's proof positive to exactly what you were talking about. And for a guy like me that's trying to help my clients see what franchises are out there, that kind of timing is everything.
100%. And I have no problem sometimes even giving out these things on calls and letting people know what I do, because the fact of the matter is 99% of people still won't do it. And it's just mind blowing to me. And that's kind of why I put out content, because, I also want to indirectly inspire all of our franchise owners. I had a call today with somebody, and he's been listening to pretty much all of the podcast episodes on Fuel Your Drive. And that's what made him pull the trigger to get a franchise. So this can obviously help someone, and that's why I love doing what I do. But from an outsider, in the franchise industry and business, because this is very important, and I talk about this all the time. Why? I don't want to say what I think. I want to hear from your side. Why is it much more important to go into a franchise model than trying to do it on your own?
I mean, there's so many reasons, and we don't have the time to go through it, but I think about where franchises are now. I mean, franchising has always been a good route, but I think you'll agree it's better today than it's ever been before. And you guys all have this stuff, the good ones, like what you have, to have the whole playbook dialed in, step 1 through step 100 of understanding how to start the business, how to grow the business. But also here's the other side. Franchisees hit lots of different sort of peaks as they go. So I think having that knowledge base of how to grow a business, the challenges you're going to face, because when you start something from scratch, you don't always know, and you waste a lot of money making mistakes. I know when we started home care assistants, we made a lot of mistakes along the way that we had to figure out before we could roll it out to our franchisees. So no, it makes the whole process of business ownership much more predictable. It's like the biggest, to me, if you're comfortable in corporate America, but you're tired of someone controlling your time, if you're tired of just making $100,000 a year, if you're tired of not being able to save up for retirement as you should, then franchising provides that perfect middle ground, because you're still going to get all the corporate support that you had before. But here's the big difference. A franchisor collects a royalty, which some people look at it and say, oh man, I don't want to pay the royalty. Dude, the royalty is the best money you can pay, because both of you guys, the franchisor and the franchisee, want the same thing. Everybody wants to grow a big multi-million-dollar location. So the franchisor is going to work their ass off to help you do that, just like you're going to work your ass off to grow a great business. So to me, there's no better, it's so opposite of corporate America where, listen, when things get tight, the guys with the high salaries get cut, right? We're seeing this all the time right now. With the franchise world, no one's coming for you. You can build a business as big as you want. You really can. You can start with one franchise and every couple of years add another franchise. It's unlimited. So to me, franchising just provides a much more predictable, much more sort of safe haven way of growing a business, as long as you're willing to go in there and work and be the X factor and build the business. And that's where finding the right business really is the ultimate X factor in all of this.
Spot on, my man. So now let's go into the next question here, because people think because you buy a franchise, it's just going to work. And that's not true, right? And I tell people this on all my calls. So let's talk through that, because people have heard me talk about this before from your perspective, you know, because I've had someone actually tell me once, like, okay, so I buy the franchise and like, what do I really do? I just hire some people and it's good and it's just going to run. Like, so let's walk through that, because that's important to understand too.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's finding that franchise where a prospective franchise owner talks to other franchisees in the system and says, I can do that. You know what? I just got fired up talking to that franchisee in Toledo. Wow. I'm excited to do this. I'm excited to lead my team. I'm excited to pay people better than they've been paid before. I'm excited to give people the job of their dreams. And I'm excited to grow a freaking empire. You're right. If someone's just looking at this and saying, well, I'm going to buy in and, you know, we're going to do, no way. No, you've got to, you are the guy, you're the, or the gal, you're the X factor. Now, that being said, here's I think there is a fine line here, because another mistake that franchisees make is when they try and do it all, when they get too involved in the business. You know what? Is there any sort of language? Can we use all the words we want to use?
You could use whatever you want in here.
Okay, let's be real. If there's a guy, like I talked to a guy who owned a printing franchise and he was in this 8th year and he said to me, I just took my first vacation and we just hit $1 million gross. I'm like, dude, you did it wrong. You completely fucked the whole thing up. You got to work on the business. If you're going to be a franchise owner, you want to hire people, you want to build your team, you want to build it so you can get that sort of work-life balance you want. Because that way, if you've got a good GM that's focused on managing your workforce, you can work it on how fast can I grow? How fast can I open that second location? How can I get to, let's say your top performing location is, you know, netting 250 grand a year. How fast can I get there? How can I get triple that? How do I do that? So as a business owner, your number one job is to work on the business, not in it. The minute you work in that business, you're screwed. You're not going to grow.
People are going to think that they're hearing me talk, but that's actually Jack. Because I say this all the time. Like, the things that we've implemented in my business, and a great book by Michael Gerber, who I know, you know, which is a fantastic book called The E-Myth, teaches you about how you should be working on the business, not in the business. Now, let me tell you something. One of my biggest things here, Jack, at Gym Guys, what we've done, we implemented a call center. We now have a whole entire hiring team where we don't actually hire, but we vet, screen, interview. We do everything and then say, Jack, here you go. Here's 10 rock stars. Hire who you want. Why are we doing these things? Because you, as a business owner, need to focus on revenue generating activities. And I want to take away all that stress and pressure, because you don't realize how much time goes into hiring and going through resumes and having people not show up and so on and so forth, and the rest of the list that goes on and on when it comes to hiring. Phone calls, leads, all that. This allows you to work more on your business. And it's so true, because I talk about this all the time. When we started, we bring on trainers, and it was not the right move, right? You got to be a really rare type of trainer for us to bring you on as a franchise owner. As soon as we made the change to more executive type people who understand leadership, management, sales, marketing, it was a game changer. Why? Just exactly for what you just said, because they understand the scale. You got to put the right people in the right seats, and that's how you make the magic happen. And it's really spot on, because I'll tell you, I had, you know, my first franchise that did $1 million took, I think, what, like 6 years, 7 years, 6 years. And now people are doing it like quick, really quick. Like, I've had some people make their money back in 3 months. Now, again, wow. I'm not putting out an earnings claim in there. I'm not saying you're going to do that, but you can. But literally, someone's made their money back in 3 months, and typically they're making it back in a year. It takes businesses 3 to 4 years to make returns on that. Like, you know, so. Absolutely. So you have to make sure you're smart with that. So before we kind of wrap up, you know, Two more questions. So what do you see for your future, right? Because you're doing amazing things. And like I said, I'm very impressed. And, I always say it's great to make a living. It's much better to make a difference. And you're hitting in that category too, because you're making a living, you're doing well, but at the same time, you're helping people, right? You're getting them an American dream. So what do you see going forward for Jack Johnson?
The world of franchising, if there's one thing that's pretty darn predictable, it's that there's always going to be great franchise opportunities every single year. But it's such a neat thing. You said the words American dream. And to me, that's why I don't think I'll ever stop doing this, because not to get all America on everybody, but let's face it, how many places can you build something like we have and live the life that, I've just seen it. I remember growing up being a kid and being in, when my parents had a hard time, we were at before the dollar store, there was the day old bread store, right? You could buy the day old bread. And so my point is that I always think back to those moments and I look where we are now. And this world of business ownership and franchising, this is where I'm going to stay. I love it. I see dreams come true every day. I have clients. My client Vince owns 27 franchises. My client Brian owns 10 franchises. I'm watching these guys, and it's just such a pleasure to be involved in this world and working with guys like you. So no, man, I'm gonna keep hustling and keep working and helping people find the right franchise. That's our bliss.
Love it. I love it, Jack. And the last thing I like to finish off my interviews, if you were conducting this interview, what question would you have asked? Always throws people off.
Ask you or ask me.
What would you ask yourself? And then you can answer it.
That is, you know what? Of all the interviews I've ever done, that's the first time someone has said that. I would say, what would be the question? The question I would ask myself is, how on earth do you make such a good Neapolitan pizza when you're out helping people find franchises all day long? And my answer would be years and years of practice and bad pizzas.
Practice makes permanence, as I love to say. Jack, where can people find you? More information if they're interested in learning about any type of franchise, not just the gym guys, for any franchise. Where can they find you?
You can find us on thefranchiseinsiders.com. You can find me, Jack Johnson, on Instagram. My name there is not that Jack Johnson. You can find us on LinkedIn, Jack Johnson Franchise Insiders. The best way also, Jack and Jill Johnson, type that in. My wife, Jill, she's got her own brand called The Franchise Mom. We're all over the place.
Yeah, they are all over the place. And I talk about it all the time, people. Omnipresence, be big, go big or you go home. If you don't do big things are not going to happen. But Jack, thank you so much for blessing us with your time. I appreciate you being a guest on Fuel Your Drive. You gave out some great golden nuggets to our listeners, and really appreciate it, pal.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and guys, don't remember, please share, like, comment. Guys, I'm doing this for you to help you grow, so please continue to share the podcast. Until next time, remember, fuel your drive.
Legend. Do you know my name? My name is Legend.